Welcome back. This is a study by the great American artist George Bellows, another early 20th century artist. He's best known for his boxing paintings. This is a study of a woman on the beach. It looks like maybe he did it in his studio, or he could have drawn on the beach, or he could have drawn it from a photograph. I can't really say. But we're going to do a close copy of it. He looks to have been right-handed, I would say, but a lot of the shading is just following the contours of the figure. So this is going to be a lot easier than last time because it's basically just a profile view of the head. And we're all really good at drawing profile heads. We're going to start out with a shorthand for the cranium and face, sort of a little profile skull. The first thing I'm asking myself here is how much tilt there is to the head. And if I go from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the ear, top of the eye, top of the ear, take the line of the face, and there's pretty much no tilt at all. So we're just going to draw a normally oriented to the left profile skull. I don't know why I was seeing some tilt there, but I think I was wrong. At this point, we could do a little measuring just so we sort of know the boundaries within which our drawing is going to fall. So I could go count heads. I'm counting head widths here. 2. So this head width is about 1/5 of the overall width of the drawing. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So as you know, I don't like to measure everything as I go, but sometimes, especially if you're not used to doing a seated figure like this, it's a good idea just to take a couple measurements. Check my focus. And we can do the same thing going downward. So here's a head height. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the head is about 1/4 of the overall height of the drawing. So it goes down to about here. This second dimension that I just measured should make sense to you, because you'll notice that her greater trochanter of her femur would be right about here. And most of us are about 4 heads to the trochanter of the femur, right? The trochanter of the femur is the midpoint of the body, and most of us are about 8 heads tall. So that's kind of logical, right? Her neck is angling strongly forward. So we can represent that angle. And then her rib cage is angling strongly back the other way. And her pelvis is sort of follows the curve of the rib cage. Everything is compressed, kind of folded over because of the way she's sitting. And notice this line I drew between the line of the face and the trochanter of the femur has sort of helped me to place the pelvis correctly around the trochanter. Obviously, the movement of the thigh is horizontal. And most of you are going to want to make the legs too small in this view. So make sure you go far enough out here towards the knee. And you'll notice that right now the drawing looks really awkward because it doesn't look like she's supporting her weight, because she isn't. Like her weight is supported by the clasped hands on the front of the knee and the extended arms. So until we do that, this drawing's not going to make a whole lot of sense. So we've got right behind the pit of the neck, we've got this shoulder coming very close to the throat. And then the other shoulder is quite a bit lower within our field of vision. It feels like our eye level is slightly above hers. So these shoulders are about the same height in real life, but this one is reading lower because it's closer to us. And I'm just going to do like a gesture for this arm. Notice that the wrist ends up just above the knee. And a little gesture for the other arm. And a gesture for this leg. Notice I'm not thinking in terms of contour right now. I'm thinking in terms of the central axis of the limb. And I just realized I got to get this knee to turn a little closer to where the other one is, a little further back. Notice I have not drawn any actual outlines that I see here yet. I'm just thinking my way through it. I'm going to add a little mass now to this arm around these axes. And this is when I ask myself, does it feel like I captured the gesture or not? And something feels a little off to me. I'm going to say that the head needs to be just a little further forward. And I can live with that. Okay. We know that the head is scaled correctly to the body. We're okay with the gesture. Next thing we're going to do is the portrait. This is not how everybody works, but this is, as I've explained, how I like to work. So let's take a closer look at this portrait. Okay, where is it? Okay. The first question we always ask ourselves is, are the eyes in the middle of the head? And I would say yes. So we're going to find our middle. Remember, the hair is going to add a little volume to this skull. Find our middle, and that's where the eye is going to be. Her eye is just about almost exactly behind the indent at the top of her nose, which is very low on her. So let's draw that little indent near the mark we just made, and then draw the contour of the forehead. This is the first actual contour that we're drawing. And we're going to measure the distance between the, wait, scratch that. We're going to go from the, we're going to mark the eyebrow behind the brow ridge. And then we're going to measure distance between the eyebrow and the bottom of the chin. And we usually look for the nose to be centered there. So I would say it is centered. She has a very classical kind of profile, so we should not expect any major deviations from averages. So we know how far down to make the nose. We can see the angle of the nose is about 30 degrees from vertical. Tip of the nose, and remember, one of the most common errors people make is to put the philtrum too far back. So her philtrum is way out here past this indentation. So we're going to drop that in right there. The rest of her nose extends behind the philtrum like this. Her facial angle is about 30 degrees from vertical. You see how there's a symmetry here between the angle of her nose and her facial angle? So let's double back the same angle that we came out for the nose. Her lips are about a third of the way down, which is what we expect again. Her upper lip does not come out to the facial angle. She has a fairly thin bottom lip and a relatively strong chin. Before we draw the eye, we're going to go ahead and shade the eye socket. And we could notice that the front of her eye is about even with the back of her nose. So if we go straight up from here, her eye is going to be about there. I talk a lot about the jawline diverging from the line of the throat. So here, this shadow edge kind of shows us where how the jaw is moving up this way. But this contour here shows us the way the throat is angling down slightly to the front of the neck, and then a pretty abrupt plane change. About there. I might have that just a little too far back. And we have a very clear shadow shape. And here is Mr. Bellows. Wait, I need to make room for a little shadow. I didn't leave room for a shadow on the chin itself. Like that. And here's his first shading direction, which is right-handed. And we can see a very effective darkening of the core of the form shadow right through here. It's something we talk about a lot, which gives us a strong sense of the strong reflected light probably bouncing off of her chest and upper arms underneath her throat. So I need to get rid of some construction lines. One way that my drawing is much cruder than Bellows right now is just has to do with line weight. So I'm going to try to make some corrections here. You'll notice that Bellows, along the forehead, for example, where the skin is brightly lit, he's using a softer contour line. It gets darker right here as it goes into shadow, and then it gets a little lighter again here. It gets darker again for the philtrum. I hope everyone knows what I mean by line weight. It's just how heavy your lines are. And the way that I'm kind of missing the expression has to do with very subtle smile in this pose, which is created by this soft shading at the outside corner of the mouth. So very, very light touch here. And you see how those little changes create a little more of the effect of this person. Very slight bit of shading under the cheekbone here. And now we're going to deal with, well, we know where to put the ear. It's right behind the top of the jaw, level with the bottom of the nose. And now I'm going to sort of block in the shape of the hair, extending just past the boundaries that I marked for the skull. You'll notice he seems to basically almost use like a duller pencil for the hair. It's like very quickly and beautifully executed. And as I often tell you, like the biggest mistake people make with hair is sort of coloring book thinking, like making the hair all the same value, but hair is shinier than skin. So you can see just what an intense contrast we have between this very, very dark hair at the back of the head, going to pure white here, and then some halftones, dark halftones up above. So we have, with just a few lines, we get the impression of fairly lustrous, volumetric hair in bright sunlight. Notice there's just a little bit of cast shadow along here of the hair onto the face. And there's a strong cast shadow back here of the hair onto the back of the neck. And again, his right-handed first shading is filling that in. Bellows also got his start as an illustrator, and you'll see something illustrators often do is they don't erase their shadow map. So you can see the shadow map of this cast shadow is still pretty visible. And because of the back of the neck is in shadow, we're using a heavy line weight till right about the bathing suit strap to define the trapezius. And like a lot of my students, I sometimes forget the little form shadow along the bottom edge of the nose because it's so small and has so much reflected light in it, but that's important too. Okay, we're gonna zoom out a little bit and try to relate some of these forms to the shoulders. So we marked sort of where this contour begins for the arm and back. And here's another example of sort of this firm shadow map of the cast shadow of the head onto the arm. I think what we're seeing here is like actually the cast shadow of the nose and the right-handed first shading. Then we've got this strap. So notice how this strap is jet black when it's inside this shadow, and then when it breaks past the shadow, it gets a lot lighter. And there's a little piece of cast shadow on the other side of the strap. And how do I know where to stop this? Well, remember we just mapped out the volume of the upper arm like this. So that's about where it ends. If I went too far, I can always erase it. Right here, we might fall back on a different kind of thinking. We might just look at this negative shape created within these darks. You see that shape? This is the sort of shape that you can think of as an abstract form, or like the boundaries of a country. And just to check your work, make sure that it sort of feels like the same shape. And that's a good way to catch errors. It's not a good way to construct a drawing. If you're constructing drawings from the ground up using negative shapes, I think you're doing something wrong because you're not really expressing your understanding of the forms. But it's a good thing to fall back on occasionally. The height of this negative shape is a little bigger than the width of the shoulder there. You see that? So that's going to give us an idea of just how wide to make this arm at the shoulder. And to get an idea where to start this point here where the arm begins, the armpit is very important. I'm going to pull a plumb line up and I'm going to say, yeah, it starts just behind the ear. So that puts us right about here. And now we're drawing another contour. We already masked in the form, but that's the actual contour of the bottom of the upper arm between the armpit and the elbow. And I'm going to answer that with the contour on the top of the bicep. And the form of her back is a little fuller than what I drew. This was sort of the rib cage, but now we've got the shoulder blade and the latissimus muscles are kind of filling out that contour. And there's the top edge of her bathing suit. And right here we've got a slight narrowing of her waist. And then a little more fullness through here as we get into the pelvis and the gluteal muscles. The bathing suit, line of the bathing suit, which defines the bottom of the, near the bottom of the pelvis, starts just past the elbow, curves around like that. Now I'm feeling fairly confident about my arm width. I'm noticing it looks too full in my drawing, but what I think that is caused by is I haven't yet shadow mapped it and drawn this shadow. So a lot of beginners, instead of reading the entirety of the form, they just read the part of the form that's lit up. You'll see that this is much narrower than this. You'll notice also Bellows did not do a first shading for this. This is just contour shading, so the shadow is so small here and so simple that he's just doing two passes, one row of hatches to define the shadow and another smaller row of hatches to define the core shadow. Get that little bit of reflected light up in there. We're going to shadow map this cast shadow now of the arm falling onto the pelvis. And you're going to notice that that's really beautifully defines the forms of the torso, the movement of this shadow. And here too, I'm not seeing any first shading. He's just basically shading quickly back and forth through this dark area, the little cross hatching here underneath the armpit. So there's an important idea I want to introduce here, which is the deliberate suppression of local color. Bellows has managed to give us, I think, a good idea that this bathing suit is a very dark color, like black or dark blue or something. But he's also trying to convey a sense of bright light. So he has he's shading this, but there's no first shading. It's only contour shading, and he's using a very light touch. So he wants to show that this bathing suit is darker in value than the skin, but he doesn't want the big jump in contrast to be from here to here. He wants it to be from here to here. He wants it to be from light to shadow. And then there's another little form shadow along here with strong reflected light bouncing into it. So we're going to go really dark, mainly through the core shadow here. And there's a little shading on the background, presumably sand, that's designed to just set off that reflected light. And you'll notice I'm consistently trying to match Bellows' shading direction. I'm not counting how many lines there are, but I am doing, it's a close enough copy that I really want to follow with my hand more or less what he was doing with his. Okay. We've done all the hard parts except for the hands, so. Okay, so there's top of this thigh is ending up a little lower than I had mapped it before. So I might have to just extend the bottom of the suit a hair. But this thigh is actually not as wide as you would think. It's sort of flattened out by the sand. So we're going to end up something like this. Just a little hint of a shadow. Not much shadow here because the bright light reflecting a lot of bright light onto the bottom of the thigh there. Oh, I think I see what I ran into trouble by not. I brought that cast shadow a little too far down. And I'm going to draw the other thigh as if the arms weren't there, just to have a sense of the overall volume. Okay. Okay, so we're going to deal with the hand now. We marked the underside of the knee, and we know the wrist is going to end up right at this intersection. So let's start by connecting the elbow to the wrist, like this, with a little cast shadow on the inner thigh. Here's an instance where he did do his first shading direction for this cast shadow. And a little darkening along the top. Here's the elbow. And it's just such a beautiful shorthand for this little form shadow of the muscle above the elbow. Give you a sense of the bone projecting out underneath it. And then this tapered form shadow along the bottom of the arm that shows the tapering of the musculature as it nears the wrist. And here's the plane change. The bicep passes past the elbow. It's aiming for a point that's past the elbow, and then we've got this slight swelling here, and then a tapering towards the wrist. So if we think about the form of the wrist, it's sort of like this is where the wrist joint is, and then the body of the hand is angled away from us because it's wrapping around. So this is sort of, I'm going to lightly indicate where that plane changes, and then we're going to draw the angle upward for the body of the hand. Remember, we think of that as a kind of like a box. So there's the direction the box is moving. Here's the thumb, sort of overlapping the top of the box. And let's just admire this for a second. It's like just like you can read every finger here, but it's just so simply drawn. Here's this finger kind of wrapping around. This one, this little finger kind of in between these two, and then the pinky. And that's it. Look, he doesn't even close the contour at the tip of the thumb. He's got this lower contour, which is a darker line weight for the bottom edge, and then like that. And I'm going to have to redo that because I just don't have quite enough. I just need a little more mass, a little more height here to get the full width of the, I wasn't really accounting for the mass of the thumb muscle. So that's a little better, but still nowhere near what Bellows did. To convey a sense of interlaced fingers and the tension of the hand wrapping around the leg and supporting the weight of the figure with those few lines is truly a marvel, if you ask me. There's a little halftone along the bottom of the hand. Here's the knee, a real simplification here of the knee. There's the top of that thigh. And here's the rest of this contour of the distal arm. Right here, there's a sense of the calf of this leg is just subtly overlapping the shin of the other leg. And this dark accent right here is like this little piece of strong cast shadow that shows that this finger is a little further extended. There's another dark right here. Helps us read what these fingers are doing. And at this point, it's time to make other corrections. I've got a little too much fullness in the trapezius. I need a little, came up a little high on the back of the cranium, I think. Again, from the beginning, I was misreading this head as tipped down a little, and that error kept creeping into my work. And I'm going to emphasize some of these darks in the hair. At this stage in the drawing, what you want to be doing is just, you can squint a little. You want to get a sense of the overall pattern of lights and darks, and you're just sort of fine-tuning. Try doing that. Try really squinting your eyes and looking back and forth between your drawing and Bellows' drawing, and just make sure that the pattern of light and dark is consistent. Missing out just a little bit of a vertical movement right at the beginning of the neck that transitions into this curve. Here we go. Okay, that's going to do it for the video today. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time.